Hello everyone, Akars here. So I didn't upload anything for a while. That's cause summer ended and I don't have that much time anymore, which is pretty sad. Anyway, today we'll continue working on my small side project called Zaris. Here is the first video about it if you're interested. Alright, let's get to it. The first thing I added since the last devlog is a health system for the character. So now you can actually take damage when golem hits you. When your health is low, you get this nice post-processing effect, which notifies that you are about to die. With health system done, I finally moved on to implement an inventory system. Cause when you collect something, you definitely need to store it somewhere. Inventory here is a radial menu with a bunch of slots. In each slot you can store one type of items, but you can stack a few items of the same type. Also, you can't get two slots to store the same item type. But to store items in your inventory, you first have to pick them up. And this is where interaction system is required. I decided to make this system similar to the one in Genshin Impact, cause again, I like Genshin Impact. So basically, we have an area around the player which detects all interactable objects and displays them as a list. The player on the other end can choose which object he wants to interact with. All of this is pretty cool, but when I added enemy looting, it became very confusing, cause I don't know what items I get. And so I had to add item pickup notifiers, which pop up when a new item gets added to your inventory. I displayed these notifiers in a very similar manner to how I displayed the list of interactable objects. I also added item rarity and made it so pickup notifiers change their color according to it. Gray is common, blue is rare, red is epic, and yellow is legendary, but it's not in the game yet. Right, we can pick up and store items, but they don't seem to be very useful. We need a way to use these items. So I added so-called use scripts. Basically, those are scripts that run when you click on an item in your inventory. This allows me to create things like food. By the way, this yellow circle here is your hunger. It represents how much health you can regenerate after you get damaged. To restore hunger, you have to eat something. So we can use some items, but other items might only be raw materials for something else. And this means that we need a crafting system. I decided to implement it in the same way I implemented inventory. I made it into a radial menu. Basically, when you are in your inventory, you can switch to crafting mode. Here you can see all the items available for crafting and resources required for them. This crafting system is very flexible. I can change the amount of items crafted and the resources needed all in one data table. I won't explain it all in details here, but you can write a comment if you want to see me doing it. Alright, now when it seems that we're done with coding for a while, I want to add some visuals. But first, let me ask you a question. What can be cooler than real green grass? Of course it's grass in video games. Inspired by this video from Stylized Station, I set out onto my way to creating a perfect grass shader. First, I modeled a simple mesh for my grass. I heard that making grass blades into geometry is less expensive than masking them using shaders, so I tried it out and it worked! And worked pretty well, I wanna say. But grass doesn't look good when it's this static and colorless, so I gave it a shader. Figuring out good looking grass wind took some time and I settled on something like this. Basically, I just scroll a noise texture on my world and depending on the value of this noise, I offset the tops of the grass blades in the wind's direction. Combining this with Unreal's default simple grass wind, we can get a very stunning grass wind. I also made use of runtime virtual textures to transfer color from landscape to my foliage and gave it some color and height variation. Next, I added some simple trees and rocks with their own procedural shaders based on world-aligned textures. It's a technique to give meshes textures without proper UV mapping. It works by projecting textures from all three axes onto a mesh. This technique dramatically simplified my level design workflow. And this technique gave me an idea. What if I use this kind of procedural shader on some buildings? And so I decided to add some ancient ruins to the game, as they were actually in the plan from the very beginning. I opened Blender and started modeling some stuff. I tried to keep things simple, not to overload the engine when I placed hundreds of these meshes all over the world. I also had to figure out how to damage these ruin elements to make them look ruiny? Is this even a word? Basically, I created a cube, slapped some subdivision surface onto it and gave it some nice displacement. And then I used it with a boolean modifier to carve out parts of my meshes. I can place these so-called damage masks manually or I can distribute them using geometry nodes. I ended up combining procedural distribution with manual. Next, I baked this 4K black and white texture of broken bricks. Nothing really special here, just some noise and Voronoi nodes here. And I used it all to create my procedural shader in Unreal. I also managed to use this texture to generate procedural normal maps for my meshes, which worked out perfectly. On top of all these bricks, I overlaid Musgrave texture, which I also created in Blender. I used it as a mask for some moss. Covering this moss with some real geometry foliage really sells this effect. I ended up creating a bunch of assets which can be used to create some really cool ruins in just a few minutes. For example, this ruin piece took me around 3 minutes to lay out and 2 minutes to cover with foliage, which is really an amazing result. So I guess this wraps it up for this video. I actually did more, but I decided to split it into a few videos. I will try to finish this project rather soon. Guess I will just make a demo of some sort and go back to working on Exolent. Anyway, thanks for watching, see you next time, bye!